Thanks, everybody. Welcome to Build. I'm your host, Ricky Camilleri, and our next guest has been living on camera for upwards of 40 years now, whether it be acting in films, TV shows, or playing himself on a reality television show. But now you can see Harry Hamlin on the stage at 59 East 59th Street Theater, where, alongside Stefanie Powers, the two of them play three different sets of siblings, arguing about family, art, love, and everything that gets in between brothers and sisters. Please welcome Harry Hamlin. Let's hear it.
Hello, hello, hello. I'm really happy to be here. This is so great.
Thank you so much for being
great.
here. It's
I
good
still
to see
have an
you.
AOL account. It's fantastic. Yeah.
Is that in use or
It's
is that...
in use, yeah.
Okay, we're all gonna go try to find out what it is.
You'll never guess.
H Hamlin at AOL.com.
Sorry.
No.
Not gonna happen.
Harry.Hamlin at AOL.
No, not gonna happen. No. Sorry. But a little of close investigation back to a nickname I once had could lead to the answer to that question. But I'm not gonna let the cat out of the bag.
Nickname, huh?
I'm not gonna let the cat out of the bag.
Okay. I'm curious what the nickname was, though, not for the purpose of your email, but just what the nickname is. But now you can't tell me because it would mean your email.
It's secret, absolutely. Yeah. But for the right amount of money, I mean, everything is for sale.
Like $5, $10. Let's talk about When November Yankee. You just told me backstage, and I didn't realize this. You've been with the show since 2013.
Yes, I originally was offered the show back in, I think it was 2012, in fact. Robert Forster was doing it with Loretta Swit in L.A. at the NoHo Theater and in North Hollywood. And Robert Forster got a job and had to leave before the show opened, 10 days before the show opened. So the director was, of course, like in a deep hole at that point. And Robert, I played poker with him the night before, and I forget whether I won a lot of money or he won a lot of money from me or I from him. But anyway, he mentioned that the director ought to call me and see if I'll step into it, which I did because I'd love to play. I read it on a Friday night, and it was instantaneous admiration for this writing.
And you basically had 10 days before the show opened, and that is not a lot of time for what is a two-hander of dialogue-heavy two-hander.
Yeah, I know. It was a pretty intense 10 days, yeah.
What does that mean? What does that 10 days look like? Is that you doing work on your own as well as nonstop working with the director?
That's 10 days of no sleep. It's 10 days of staying up until late at night trying to memorize lines, because it's 80 minutes, that means 40 minutes of it, it's all me, because it's two-hander. And so 40 minutes of dialogue to learn that, and then to do it right, to get the right inflections and all of that, and find out who the characters are, because we play three different sets of brothers and sisters. So I had to discover three characters in the 10 days. And, it was a challenge.
That said, three different characters, but at the same time, you don't want them to be too different from each other because they are supposed to sort of correspond and correlate to the other characters or play off of them.
Well, yeah, I mean, I wanted there to be a pretty discernible delineation in characters between the three of them. I mean, one of them, the closest one to me, I think, is the hiker scene. You saw the play, so that's the closest to who I am. But in the first iteration of the play, I'm an artist, and I'm opening an artist installation at MoMA. In the second iteration, and the installation, by the way, is about a plane crash. It's a crashed plane on the stage, and which the audience always loves that. They come in and they see this it's a life-size Piper Cub.
It is this.
Yeah.
But life-size crashed nosedive on the stage.
And then the second iteration, I'm actually in the crash, the actual crash that I'm doing the art exhibition about. The third iteration, I am with my sister hiking through the woods of New Hampshire, and we stumble upon this plane that has been missing for 5 years.
What is it about that hiker that you feel close to, or is the closest character to you?
Well, I have a brother who died, not in a plane crash, and there is that scene, our brother was killed in a commercial plane crash, which is actually what the play was based on. That is an actual event that happened to one of the playwright's friends. His brother was killed in a commercial plane crash in Detroit in the early 70s, where a commercial plane took off, and the pilot just forgot to set the flaps, and it crashed immediately because he didn't put the flaps. So that comes up in the script about. In the third iteration, we're talking about our brother who was killed in a plane crash because the pilot just forgot to set the flaps.
Forgive me if I get too personal. How old were you when your brother passed?
He died at 61, and
he died
2011.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So when you got this in 2012, did you see this as a means with which that you could work through some of that, or was it just something that you related to because of that?
No, sure. Look, there's a lot of every play that you do as an actor. We always find something that relates to us in it. We find some substitution somewhere, and in this play, there's so much. I mean, my sister came to see the play last week. She lives in New York, and I did not grow up with her, so we don't have the same kind of sibling relationship that they have in the 3 iterations in the play. But having had a brother and having a sister, a half sister anyway. There's going to be stuff. There's going to be crossovers. There's going to be ways. There's going to be a nexus between me and the play and me and my siblings, and that really, I think, was what gave me the real sense that I needed to do this play. I needed to really investigate it.
How often do you do plays?
As often as I can.
Really?
Yeah. No, the theater is my first thing. I mean, I grew up in the theater, and I did my first play at 11, and didn't think I wanted to be an actor really, but that evolved. That kind of happened by accident in college, and then I went to the American Conservatory Theater and got my Master of Fine Arts, and that's in theater. So when I actually was offered my first movie role, I turned it down because I said, I'm never going to do movies.
What movie was that? Do you remember?
Well, the first thing I was offered was a huge miniseries called Awakening Land, and I turned that down. And then Warner Brothers, it was a Warner Brothers project, and they kept offering me more and more stuff. And then Stanley Donen offered me Movie, which with George C. Scott, and I turned that down too, because I was only going to do theater, and I had gotten a Fulbright scholarship to study abroad, to study Shakespeare abroad. And I said, I'm going to do this Fulbright. I'm not going to do movies. I'm only.
Who convinced you to do movies?
My mother. Because
How so?
Because she said, because the movie that I was offered was directed by Stanley Donen, who directed Singing in the Rain, and it was starring George C. Scott, and I was the lead in it. I was offered the lead in it, and I turned it down, and I said, I'm going to do this Fulbright. And my mother said, but Harry, you don't need another credit on your resume. You've been to Yale, you've studied at ACT, you've got your Master of Fine Arts. Why do you need to have a Fulbright on your thing? And she said, by the way, I want to meet George C. Scott. So you're doing the movie because I'm going to meet that man. So that's why I did it.
But is it because it wasn't that you needed something on your resume, you just like studying? You enjoy studying the craft of acting?
Well, it's a little more complicated than that because the Fulbright that I applied to, and I applied on a whim, just because a friend of mine had an extra application and she wasn't going to use. And I didn't even know what a Fulbright was, but she explained to me that if you've signed up for a Fulbright and you got it, you could study abroad, and they give you enough money to study. And I said, well, okay, that sounds like an interesting thing. And I filled it out to study at the Moscow Art Theater. And this is when the Soviet Union was still the Soviet Union, and Brezhnev was president of Russia, or Soviet Union. Carter was president at the time.
This is the late 70s then? Mid to late 70s?
Yeah, 1975, 76. And I just filled it out. I forgot all about it, right? And then I got this letter in the mail a couple months later saying, you got it. So you're going to Moscow, And so I went out to learn Russian, and I took a bunch of Russian classes. And then Carter and Brezhnev got into some big spat, and they took all the visas away, all the student visas away. So my visa was canceled. I couldn't go to Russia, but the Fulbright people said, okay, but we still want you to do it. We'll send you to London. We want you to go to London, absorb theater, work with some people who had worked with Olivier, write a paper, and come back. But it was still an opportunity to go to London, see all the West End plays, and kind of absorb what they're doing over there in the theater. And since my whole life was the theater at that point, I was very excited to do that. So when the movies thing came up, I had no desire to do movies or television.
Do you find that when you're doing a play, as an actor, you get to continuously learn and think about the craft, where on movies or in TVs, if you really want to learn, it's about you learning about the technicians and how movies are made, because it's such a stop and start sort of atmosphere, versus plays where you have weeks to talk about the character and how you might play it, and you had 10 days, but then you had 6 years to also develop it.
No, that's a very good point. And when you're working on film, if you make a mistake, you just stop and you do it again, right? It's real easy. There's no pressure when it comes to that, to get it right the first time. Whereas you walk out on stage on opening night, and if you flub it up, you're going to flub it up. There's no going back, right? There's no take two. So you have to be really prepared, and you have to really know what you're doing on opening night when you get to a play. But yeah, in terms of learning the craft, I still go to class every Saturday. I've been going to acting class my entire life, and
Do you really?
yeah, and so I put up plays, I put up scenes, I put up develop stuff in acting class, and I can't live without being in class.
Really? When did you realize that did you ever take a break and then were like, oh, I need acting class. I need to keep going?
Well, I did. I took a break when I got this law show, L.A. Law, years ago for NBC, and when you're working on a TV show, which I turned down also, by the way, at first.
You just loved turning stuff down, didn't you?
I don't like commitments. I don't know, like that. But anyway, so we would work on Friday night until 3 o'clock in the morning. So we called it Fraturday. So my class is at 9 a.m. on
You're always
Saturday.
pushing it throughout the week. So by the time you
Push it-
get to
like,
Friday,
and the union says that you can work a certain number of hours on the weekends before they have to actually stop and pay you more money. So you always work late into the night on Friday night. So this class is on Saturday morning. It's a master class. It's been going for years and years. And
who's the teacher?
it used to be Milton Katselas. I studied here with Lee Strasberg in New York. After I did Clash of the Titans, I came back and studied here, and then went to L.A. because Lee recommended him in Milton in L.A. And then he died a few years ago, and the class is now being taught by Howie Deutsch, a great director.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, Leah,
Right,
yeah,
exactly.
her husband and Zoe Dutch's father,
Exactly,
right?
Howie Deutsch's dad. Right.
Yeah. Oh wow, I had no idea that he was teaching that he took over for Milton Gonzalez. You mentioned Clash of the Titans. That is a movie with incredible stop motion animation all throughout it. And I'm wondering, we talk to people in superhero movies all the time now about looking at the tennis ball and having to pretend. But what were the practical effects like on that movie at the time, or was it mostly animation that was done that was like keyed in afterwards?
We didn't have any tennis balls. No, no. But I got into some serious fights. I don't know if anybody in this audience has seen Clash of the Titans, but there's a famous scene in it where I cut off Medusa's head, and I got into a huge fight with everybody on the set the day we were supposed to shoot that. We were in Malta. We were shooting in a warehouse where they'd built a set for Medusa's lair. And I had a trailer, one of those trailers that's like, an actual trailer thing. And in the morning, they came to me and they said, "Excuse me, but we got a telex last night from London, and you can't cut Medusa's head off with the magic sword because it'll get an X rating for violence in England if you actually are part of the whole cutting off of her head thing." And I said, "Well, what do you want me to do?" They said, "Well, we figured it out. We're going to have you throw your shield up against the wall, and it's going to, like a frisbee, inadvertently slice her head off. And that way, your head goes off, and you're not connected to the killing, so there's X rating, blah, blah, blah." And I just said, "Okay, that sounds really cool, but not for me, so you're going to have to find somebody else to finish the movie." And I quit. And so I went into my trailer and locked the door. And
Who was your director on that?
Desmond Davis was the director of that. But Ray Harryhausen was on the set. The producer, Charles Schneer, was on the set. And they were not happy that we were 3/4 of the way through the movie. And I said, I'm going to fly back to L.A. tonight because I'm not going to do it that way. And there's no way they could force me to do it. They couldn't drug me or anything like that. I just said, no, I'm not going to do it. And all during the day, they kept sending in people to try and convince me to come out and do it, But every time they sent somebody in, that person, I would turn them, and they'd come out and they'd be on my side. So so by the end of the day, we got to 4 o'clock, and they finally had to relent. I mean, this is before cell phones, so every time they made a call, they had to drive miles and miles to a payphone, and they had to arrange payphones and all that stuff, and went back and forth. So finally, they relented at 4 o'clock, but they were so mad at me for that actually, for that and another reason, I never talked to the producers again. And it was 25 years before Ray Harryhausen ever reached out to me after that too. Wow. So it was they didn't like me. They thought they could have lost a lot of money with that, but then they said, "Look, we're going to do this huge worldwide tour. We're going to go all around the world, and we're going to promote the movie a month before it opens." And they said, "This is going to be great because we're going to go to like 7 different countries. They're going to cover Asia. They're going to cover India. They're going to cover Europe. All the And they said, "But the whole thing's going to kick off in Johannesburg." And I said, well, look, I'm good with everything but Johannesburg, because I was on a committee in L.A., an anti-apartheid committee in L.A., and I said, I'll do the whole thing except for Johannesburg. They said, but no. They said, but Johannesburg is underwriting the whole thing. South Africa's underwriting the whole tour. And I said, well, I'm sorry, but I can't do that. I'm not going to go to South Africa. This is, apartheid was, at that point, a word that not that many people knew. This is, early 80s, I guess, 81 or something.
Yeah, it
like
wasn't
that.
until the mid to late 80s, I feel like, that it became a much
Yeah.
bigger discussion, or at least in popular culture.
Yeah, because these guys said, what's apartheid? That's what the producer said. I said, well, go look it up, and so I ended up not doing
Slavery, guys.
I ended up not doing the tour, and they said that they lost 20, 30, 40 million dollars because of that, and so I always wanted to get the sword, but after that I knew they weren't going to give it to me.
Did that hurt your career? Did you feel like that hurt your career?
No,
No.
no.
Because that movie was what, 80, 81?
81.
And your career really started in like 76, 77?
77. It was the movie that sort of made everything come to a halt was Making Love.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Why did that make everything come to a halt?
Well, because it was way before its time. It was the first time a gay-themed movie, love story, had ever been done by a major studio, and it was being done by 20th Century Fox. With Sherry Lansing was running the studio then. It was a big studio picture, and I played a gay man, and I was, a nice guy. So I wasn't.
Right, you weren't like Rope or something.
Yeah, exactly. So that movie was just the Hollywood wasn't ready for a gay movie at that point, And
you feel as though that movie slowed your career down?
Well, it was the last studio picture I ever made. Wow. So I mean, do the math.
Did it not do well at the box office?
It didn't do what they'd hoped it would do. They did all these calculations on numbers. They had the number of gay men in America, and they did a campaign where they made matchbooks and they distributed them to gay bars all across the country. This whole thing, and they thought it was gonna, if they could get like 1/10 of the gay population, then they did all these numbers. But like I said, it was ahead of its time. But here's the thing: not a week goes by in my life, or has since then, when somebody doesn't come up to me and say, "Oh man, thank you so much. You changed my life."
Oh wow!
Not a week. I mean, and to be able to do a movie where you have that kind of an impact on people and their lives. I mean, and the same thing with Clash of the Titans. I mean, men come up to me all the time and they go, "Man, that movie made me want to be a hero, or made me want to have my sense of right and wrong came from that movie." So I'm very fortunate that in the few studio pictures that I made, they were quite impactful.
You said that before we started, you said that you were on Andy Cohen last night, and part of you being on Andy Cohen, I know you're promoting the show, but also the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, which you've been sort of peripheral tertiary character on for about 10 seasons. You have said no to so many movies and shows over the course of your career, as you said. Did you say no to that at first? How often have you said no to being on camera for that show?
Well, when Lisa first mentioned it to me, I remember exactly where I was, what time of day it was, what day of the week it was. When she, it's one of those moments, right?
Yeah.
And she said she was considering doing that show, and I said, I said, whoa. I said, I keep my divorce lawyer on my speed dial, just so you know. And
You said that to her?
I said that to her. Those were my exact words, But I was doing it partially in jest, but I was also making a point, that that those shows are nuts, right? And oftentimes couples don't stay together from those shows. There's, But then I considered it from another angle when I had a conversation with Bethany Frankel, who's on the New York show, and she had this brand called Skinny Girl that turned into a huge thing for her life, changed her life. And we have a clothing business, and Lisa does the clothing business. She said this is going to be a great branding opportunity for the clothing business, which it has been. So, and as far as being on the show, I refused to sign the release on the first night of shooting, and it was a little underhanded because I was shooting a movie up in Vancouver, and I was supposed to get back by a certain time so I could be at this dinner for Lisa's birthday at this restaurant called Pump that Lisa Vanderpump had just built, and darn it, my plane was late. So they shot a few hours with Lisa already for her first time ever on camera, and she was brilliant, you know. And they had all this great stuff in the can, and I arrived late, and they said, "Now you got to sign your release." And I said, "Well, I don't feel like signing it." And they pulled all the cameras out. They said, "Oh, well, then your wife's not going to be on the show," and they pulled all the cameras. But they had this great stuff in the can, right? So it was now 11 o'clock at night. They had to call New York. It's now 3 o'clock in the morning in New York or whatever, and they've somehow got to roust all the mucky mucks up, and they've got to say, well, what do? We've got this great footage on Lisa Rinna. Her husband's refusing to sign the release, and we've taken all the cameras out, and they really had no choice but to put the cameras back in, continue shooting, and let me shoot without a release. So once they had me on camera without a release, basically I could say, you know what? I'm only going to do this when I want, and I don't have to, because, normally...
You still not have a release that you've signed?
I signed a release, but it says I don't have to do it unless I want to.
Wow.
It says if yeah.
So you can very easily just wake up and be like, I'm not going to that today. I'm not
Absolutely.
doing that.
Oh, yeah, you won't.
You do that often?
I do that 99% of the time. Yes.
Why is that?
Have you seen the show?
People love it. I have seen parts of people love the show. I have only seen snippets,
Yeah. Well, I don't, I have a survival instinct that's, no, so yeah, no, it's not my cup of tea.
Has the show ever put a strain on? I mean, you said you have your divorce lawyer on speed dial, and knows partially in jest, but I'd imagine 10 seasons, 10 years of doing this, of sharing your personal life, your marriage, as much as some of it is produced, some of it is also probably fairly real. Has it ever put a strain on your relationship?
Well, first of all, I would say most of it's real. There's no script there at all. From the production point of view, they might say to somebody, it's getting a little boring. That's about as far as they'll say. Now go. But yeah, but as thank God I have a degree from Yale in psychology. So and I've kept up with that, and I keep a copy of the DSM-5 close at hand. So that's the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, which outlines all of the personality disorders that one can encounter in their lifetime. So with that by my side and my degree under my belt and the fact that I've kept up with it, I can sit and help Lisa get through all those icky bits in the as she's doing it, and it seems to work out that way. And also, my wife is Lisa Rinna. I mean, she is. If there's anybody who can do that show and get through something like that and do it without any scars, it's going to be Lisa. So.
Why is that?
She's probably the smartest person I've ever met, and that it comes out in really interesting ways. But she knows what she's doing. She knows how to handle that kind of thing, and she's not going to allow herself to get wrapped up in something that she can't handle, ultimately. And then, we help each other out when it comes to that. So.
I think we have time for a question from the audience. Who's a question? They're running over.
Hi. We have a question from online from our site. Throughout your career, what has been the role you learned from the most, and what did you learn?
Well, in life, the role I've learned from the most is my marriage. Okay, but in terms of roles, that's a really interesting question, and I'm not sure that it's possible to answer that question without eliminating a lot of things that I've learned a lot from that. You can't pick out one thing, I think in the most interesting thing I ever did, which is, this is so cliche, right? But I was offered Hamlet in 1982, which I did. My agents didn't want me to do it, but I did it at the McCarter Theater, and it was a huge success. And investigating that play over a 4-month period before doing it probably was more informative to me than anything else, because there are lines in that play, and there's one line in particular in that play that sticks out among many, but it's Hamlet says, "There's nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so." And that phrase right there, I think, captures one of the great I don't know, spiritual. I don't know if it's spiritual, but one of the great and most wise ideas that human beings can have. In that, our sense of self, our sense of everything is basically just here, and our meaning is here, everything is here, and it's not in the outside world. So, if we can control that, we can control everything.
Morality is relative, right? Like that's kind of it's all or subjective.
It's everything is subjective. Exactly.
Yeah.
There's nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so.
You said it's a cliche, and actors love doing Hamlet. Like they talk about it all the time. But I'd imagine you've done other Shakespeare as well.
I have.
What is it about investigating Hamlet specifically as an actor playing Hamlet that brings so much forth for you?
Well, I mean, I think in terms of all of Shakespeare's plays, and I've done a lot of them, it's the one that's the most multidimensional, and Shakespeare put into that play pretty much every great idea that you can imagine to trying to investigate the human condition. And he did it with humor, and he did it with tragedy. And his other plays have a lot of the same ideas in them. But Hamlet it's like the kitchen sink.
Yeah.
It's amazing how he was able to put it all in this one play, which runs 5 hours if you do the whole thing. But mine was 3 hours.
3 hours.
Yeah.
So I imagine there's a lot of cuts that were
2 hours of cuts. Yeah.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
incredible. Do you wish that you could do the 5 hours, or is 3
No.
enough?
No. No.
3's enough.
3's definitely enough. Yeah.
Whereas One November Yankee is an hour and 20 minutes.
Yeah, and this is really great. I love
Yes.
an hour and 20-minute plays is
Same.
perfect. No intermission. You just go in, bing, bang, bong.
It's taut, and it's very funny.
Yeah.
Harry, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for being here. One November Yankee is currently at the 59 East 59th Street Theater, and you guys are running till when? When are
December 29th.
December 29th, so there's only about a week left to go check out the show, guys. Make sure you do it, and give Harry Hamlin a huge round of applause for being here. Let's hear it.